This video is brought to you by our amazing supporters over at Patreon. Hey everyone, it's Ben from Board to Bits, and in this video we're going to talk about the benefits of using level data to store the different levels of your game. Now, Unity obviously gives you the option to create multiple scenes that you can load up when you need them, and you could handcraft all of your levels, each in an individual scene, and load them up that way. However, I find it's really useful to be able to just create a level data file that customizes each level and load that up instead of having to load these unique scenes. First off, I think it's a lot more convenient to be able to organize a bunch of files in your assets folder rather than having to organize scenes. Likewise, you have the option that you can create an exportable file, something like an XML file or something else that you can edit outside of Unity if you need to, but also that you can review a little bit more easily than having to jump into a scene and go through it that way. Likewise, it really helps with level loading and level editing, because instead of creating these separate levels that you have to, parse through, you can actually just pass the data into sort of a generic level that will then customize itself to reflect the data that's being given. Now, there are a few requirements for this to work. First, you do need a default level that can be customized, and we've actually done that in the initial setup of the game, and I'm going to take us through that quickly and we'll look at what I did to make that happen. And then we need a file structure for our data, and we're going to do that today by creating a scriptable object that we can use to set up our level data for each level that we want to create. So first off, let's jump into MonoDevelop, look at our level manager script, and see how we've set it up so that it will customize itself based on some level data. So here in MonoDevelop, in our level manager script, we see that we have these three variables that are really containing the level data of our game. We've got a position that our player starts at, a goal position, and then a vector 3 array that holds any number of obstacles that we want to place throughout our level. Hey folks, just a quick note here that in this script, obviously I'm only using vector 3s and arrays of vector 3s. You can really use, though, any sort of information you want and store it in these variables. You can store integers, floats, strings, even go so far as to store your custom classes, even actual entire game objects. If you want to store like a prefab, if you have, say, a custom obstacle that you want your level to have, you could make a public variable of that and store that in your level data. It's not limited just to vector 3, so just wanted to get that in there, and on with the video. Now, when we set up our level at the start of the scene, we clear out any obstacles that we may have already had, and then we position the player where we set the data to be as the player position. Likewise, we do the same for the goal. And then we iterate through each obstacle in the obstacle positions array and position those as well. And what this really means is that instead of having to have hand-placed these for every single level, we can simply type in whatever information we want there and be able to load that up freely. And that's the other real big benefit of this, is that we can simply save this to the file and then load it up the moment that we need it. So with all that in place, we can actually now, instead of simply having the information here right in the inspector of our level manager, let's kind of pull that out and be able to have, instead of, like I say, these three variables here, have an actual file that we can put in here instead, and simply, drop in that file, or eventually have our program drop in that file for us as we go from, like, say, a level loading screen in a main menu, or even when we want to create a level editor and be able to save this data to this sort of file. So to do that, we're going to create a new C# script, and we're going to call this level data. I'll open this up in MonoDevelop as well. And there's just a couple things we need to do to make this a scriptable object and make it convenient to work with. First thing we'll do is we'll change this from a mono-behavior to a scriptable object. If you've seen my video on scriptable objects, a lot of this will seem pretty familiar. However, there is one change, which is in our attributes up here. It's a little bit easier of a way to do this, which is to say create asset menu, and then menu name equals, and then you can kind of create the hierarchy you want here. This will appear when you right-click in your assets folder, and it says to create different assets you can put in. So I'm going to put in here data file. So we'll say that we want to create a data file, and then we'll call it level data. Typically makes sense to kind of follow the same name as your scriptable object. We can delete the start and update functions. We don't actually need those. All that this scriptable object is going to hold right now is those three same pieces of data. And I'm actually just going to copy those right from here. So we copy this and paste it properly. There we go. And now this is all that our level data file needs. In fact, we can go back into Unity here. If I go to Assets, right-click, Create, Data File, Level Data, create that here. I'll call this level 0. And we see that that contains those same 3 pieces of information. If I go to my level, I've got player position, goal position, obstacle. Same thing here. So we can create something a little different here. Maybe you start at -4 on the X, something like 4 and 4 for the goal. And then we'll create 3 more obstacles for this one, but we'll keep the first one right in the middle. Maybe the next one just go down about -1.5, and then the last one can go down -3. That's all fine. Like I say, put any data you want in here. Our level will reflect it properly. Now with this level data file, we now need a place to put that. We'll start off putting it into our level manager, kind of like we've got this here. So what I'm going to do is I am now going to delete these 3 level data points here, and instead we'll put in a public level data variable, and I'll just call that level data. Now obviously our setup level method doesn't like this because now we no longer have references to the player position, goal position, and obstacle positions. That's because they're all now contained in here. But they are public, so it's pretty easy for us to reference those. We simply have to put level data dot player position, and we'll do the same for the other variables. So we can just paste this in everywhere we want it. Finally here, save that, and now what we get is that this changes to just that single level data variable. So we can drag and drop this right in there, and we'll see that when we hit play, the level now reflects that starting off in the -4 on the X here. We've got those lined up obstacles, and the goal is up at 4 and 4 in the corner here. Still works just as we normally have it, simply now being able to be drawn from this file instead of from those data points. Now what's also nice about this is that we really ultimately aren't going to want necessarily our level manager to be what's holding this level data information. We're really going to want to be passing it from some sort of program managers that's loading up these levels from wherever they're stored, or like I say, if we have a level editor, and we're going to want to be able to pass these out of the level and into some kind of file. So it would really help if instead of storing this here, we were able to just like I say, pass in a command and just treat this as a parameter rather than as its own kind of hard and fast variable. So what we can do to do that is pretty simple. In our setup level here, instead of referencing this variable that's inside of the class, we can simply pass it in as a parameter up here. We'll say level data, and we can actually get rid of this up here. The issue with this, however, is that remember that this is now listening to this event here on level start, and the on level start template, this level start handler, doesn't have that parameter in there. So we need to make sure that's getting passed in there as well. So we need to say level data, we'll just call it LD here for short. So now we know that when we call on level start, we are passing in this level data here. Now likewise, that means that when we actually call the onLevel start event, we need to have that level start data there. So we'll say, LD here, but in order to actually be passing that in, we need to make sure that in our public, this is now where we're calling from the outside. Whatever is calling the method from the outside is passing that in as well. So we need to make one final parameter here of level data. So basically the order of how it goes is something outside of the game, of our game loop, calls this start level, passes in the level data. If the event has a listener, we call that event, passing that same level data, which then says, okay, I can call on level start. Setup level is listening for that. Setup level gets that level data information, so it's just being kind of like a bucket brigade being passed from method to method. or in this case from method to event to method, and now it's finally that information is being populated in here. So what is actually calling this start level right now is our outsider script. And again, this would represent that level loader or whatever we're going to ultimately be using. So we do just need to make sure that we have some reference to the level data here. So we need to pass in the parameter here as well. But we don't actually have a place for it here yet, so we're going to create a quick public variable in here. And again, remember, this is just kind of a demo script, but we can add in level data here. And simply when we call start level, make sure we include that as the parameter. So now we can jump back into Unity here, go to our outsider object. We can pass that level 0 file into there. And so now the level manager, the game loop, doesn't actually have any reference to this level. It's going to be told from the outside kind of overall manager, hey, here's what level we should be doing, and it can start playing it. So now we hit play, and we get that same information right there. It still gets the same data, still creates the same level for us, and we still get the same experience. So this is a little bit of a quicker video, but what this really is doing for us is setting up that foundation so that we can do level loading and things like creating a level editor in the future. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.